Hello and welcome back to the Transfer Flow. And on today's episode, we're talking the North London derby. How scared should Spurs be off the drop after their 4-1 defeat to Arsenal? How scared should Arsenal be of Man City pipping them to the title? What has Arteta been getting wrong? What do we think of the bottling narrative? We get into all the juicy stuff. Then we look at Chelsea and Real Madrid, two sides dealing with the fallout of bad ex-boyfriends and trying to figure out what teams they are as they get rid of their control tactics. Then we look at Nico O'Reilly for Manchester City, West Ham turning into a fire-breathing dragon, and plenty more. That's all in today's episode of the Transfer Flow. Shall we get into the football then, seeing as you've said that you could just throw spitballs, so I'm expecting some spitballs today, man.
Well, no, I mean, this is the anti-spitball day for the North London derby in particular. Like the two players that fans have hated on the most this season on Arsenal's squad are both, 65 million pound men that scored a brace of pair to put them over the top at Spurs. And the meltdown is at least on pause for the moment.
It is on pause. But it's always looming there, and it's
it's a bit like your anxious ego.
Yes, exactly.
The negative self-talk from Arsenal is just endemic outside of the team. The team seems like they're having fun for the most part and doing fine.
Well, you say that the previous two games. The Wolves game. Okay, so the Wolves game, they were super dominant. Like, kind of gave up nothing. I think there were lots of errors in how they played, but broadly, you look at that match, you're like, that's tough to drop points. The Brentford game, I thought they were horrendous and could easily have lost. Had absolutely
Brentford
no control.
paddled them. That was the first time I think this season where I felt like Arsenal were overmatched in a game. And Brentford really took care of business in that game, unlike the Brighton's visit this weekend. The Wolves game. Wolves are surprisingly lively for a team that is just rooted at the bottom of the table. I thought that they just sort of coast and give up, but those guys are fighting, and that's pretty scrappy and it's slightly unusual for what we see in football. Arsenal are a bit leggy. I think that there's a lot of competitions right now. They're a bit tired. Nobody is quite fully healthy, it seems like. And the center forward bit is probably the toughest bit. But Gyökeres farming goals against bottom of the table teams is a normal thing. So why expect anything different against Spurs?
Yeah, and Iberici has apparently hates
Spurs
with every atom of his body. But it's an interesting thing, right? Okay, this game, because you can argue that some of the things that have gone wrong for Arsenal recently have been to sink too deep, to take their foot off the gas, even when they've had a couple of goal leads. And it's been a kind of truism, right, in analytics for a while that teams are much too eager to drop off when they have an advantage. It'd be better for them to keep going and kind of press home that advantage, unless we're talking like the last 2 minutes of a game. As you've said before, your normal strategy is designed to score goals and not give any goals up. Yeah. So would you argue then that this Spurs game feels like a better reflection of that bit of wisdom than the games that have been coming before?
So the thing that freaks me out about Arsenal is their top tier midfielders keep giving away goals, and they keep giving away goals near their own box. Zubamendi had the freebie that he gave away a couple of weeks ago. This one was a Rice freebie that they also gave away. And Spurs are bad and not very threatening, but there were moments there where they could have scored goals. There was a save from Raya that basically was on the goal line that he shoved away from Charlison. There was a Kolomwani equalizer that was penalized for a two-handed push in the back that was a little too obvious on Gabriel, although Gabriel made the most of it. There's somebody, I think JJ Bull had a really good tweet this week talking about how referees live in this non-reality where the strength of a footballer and all of the things that they show is up to how much they decide they want to try and win a foul at this particular moment. The amount of times that I see a footballer just go straight to the ground when that they're super strong and they've just decided that they're going to go down on any contact and the referee has to call it is shocking, because these dudes are taught to be incredibly fierce, amazing balance, and that's what the referee has to call all the time. There's a ton of judgment call inside of that, and this was a little bit on the Gabriel one too. Obviously it's away at Spurs, it's a North London derby. There's always some sort of fire behind it. It was a really interesting match, especially for the first half. And I thought that I was enjoying the watching of it, much more so than the Olympic hockey, which was extremely tense the entire time.
So I gather. Yeah, I mean, the thing is, though, what do you think of this? I guess a place that would be good for us to go is to talk about this bottling narrative. Like, it's not really the kind of word that would normally come up on our podcast, because normally we just dismiss it. And it's worth pointing out that through this run where Arsenal have been not great, they've been picking up points at exactly the same rate as Man City. Man City have had some bad results too. And obviously
it is partly a media-driven narrative.
Sure.
Like the mainstream media is very much, they love to pick on Arsenal. They love it, partly because Arsenal fans rise to the bait, and the hate clickbait is like all right there, right? And Arsenal fans are the world's most awesome fans at clicking on a poll and getting them to win for whatever reason. And so the Manchester United media in particular love to pick at Arsenal because so many years they actually have fallen away. But they fell away not because they were bottling it, but because they weren't the best team. Like the only year that I can remember in recent times that Arsenal were tied for the best team was 23-24. And that was like right there. It was right on the cusp, but they were so good. And then last year they were not. They had endless amounts of injuries. This year they are. And you and I have talked about it. Like I've been very consistent. Like, hey, the gap is so big between them and City, it's hard to see them falling away. And I have a future on City, so I would love to find optimistic rays of light to say I'm going to win this at 3-1. That was a pretty beefy price that I took, but I don't see that happening. And unless a lot of injuries happen at once or something completely catastrophic happened, they just look like by far and away the best team, not just in the Premier League, but in Europe. Like this team fucking rocked the Champions League, and they faced good teams throughout the run in the Swiss phase or whatever we call it. So I don't know. You and I don't like the word bottling. Like I think it's very silly. Sometimes teams do crumble under pressure, but for the most part, there's nothing to see there. Like this is the normal up and down of a very competitive Premier League season.
Yeah, I mean, I broadly agree. As in, I pretty much do agree. But it's the thing that we don't actually really talk about enough is how much Arsenal have been injured this season. Like this is a team who they've been much more injured than their rivals as a general rule. Like City had a bad spate around January, went out and bought 2 Premier League starters from other sides. They've got most of those guys back now. Whereas Arsenal are only just kind of getting fit now, and there's still the question mark about whether Havertz is going to play for the rest of the season. Marino looks like he's not going to play for the rest of the season.
Yeah.
And some of that is on Arteta. I think, we talked about him going too hard in cups. I think that against Wolves, I do think that it was like pressure. I find it hard to think it was anything else. They were going long relentlessly. The long passing this season has seemed particularly aimless for whatever reason. I mean, to me, maybe Arteta says that he was kind of telling them to keep it on the deck and maintain possession towards the end of that Wolves game. And I think, yes, these players should be able to do controlled possession to see out a game. However, and also they've been missing Ødegaard, who's like kind of he's their technical leader, and a bunch of other players who'd probably be useful for them. But some of those players don't play because Arteta prefers for them not to play. Like Arteta wants Nketiah and Timber. Well, those guys, as good as they are probably your least technical fullbacks.
Correct.
Like MLS and White, I'd imagine, would be better at that passing round at the back.
We saw so many times where MLS was a pressure release valve as a left back last year and able to shift inside. And I talked in preseason that I thought that he was like a future starter at that left 8 spot because of the things that he does. He creates all sorts of mismatched pressure moments for other teams where he just moves through the thirds in ways you don't expect. But, the guy's trying to win multiple different trophies, trying to overcome this narrative. Sometimes head coaches can't quite get out of their way. And especially in times of pressure, they revert to the things they know. And everything's very loud. And so they try and cut everything out. But I mean, we've talked about this with Pep too, and Pep's the greatest league manager of all time. But Pep outthought himself tactically for this reason and that reason. Like, there's always a narrative around the discussion. I think that you're right in that, our Arteta does not rotate enough ever, and probably won't, especially given the depth and quality of that squad. Their fullback injuries have been incessant since Arteta got there, and some of that's the player, but some of that's also the usage. So it's concerning. And So I think we're coming full circle to actually say, like, some of the anxiety around North London on the red side of it is not unwarranted, because there are worries ahead, and especially given the fixture crunch that's there.
Yeah, and I think that, there are also the habits that have been built over the last few years. You have when these guys go long, everybody complains about it now. Because the percentage has been really low on Raya's long kicks, especially. Like, Gyökeres is not particularly good at bringing these down. In fact, I'd say he's genuinely quite bad. But also, over the last 2 years, what have Arsenal had? Well, they've always had one of Marino or Havertz, who is that kind of comfort blanket. It's like, well, we can go long because it's not going to come straight back at us, because we have one of the two best aerial players in the league up there. And so, in the absence of those guys, I think it does make sense to keep your foot on the gas. In this game, Arsenal had 60% of the ball and 20 shots. And it was just like, Spurs just couldn't get a handle on the game. And maybe I think that's partly informed by the Wolves thing. It might also be partly informed by Spurs coming back to draw with City recently, where it felt like City said, okay, well, here's the ball, see if you could do something. And Spurs were like, okay.
But also only 13 healthy players in that squad, basically. Like, the rest of the Spurs squad is just academy kids and cast-offs that happen to find a spot. Like, if you wanted to punch down on them, like, now's the time. And I'm not trying to give Spurs, like, a positive shine on this one, but, like, they're overmatched, and it's not a surprise.
What do you think about James Bench had this interesting article about teams shooting from range, and Arsenal conceding goals way over what you'd expect from XG from range. We've obviously talked recently about this idea of players getting shots in their sweet spots, and Arsenal obviously have built this great defense on defending their box incredibly well. Is there a possibility there also that there's a bit of an edge for opposing teams if Arsenal are giving up a little bit more space outside the box for some of these plus shooters like Cunha and Krupi to take on the attempts that they like to take?
I think the Manchester United ones were not those obvious moments. Like, those were ones that were
the Dorgu ones, certainly no.
Yeah, exactly. Those were a little bit in transition or just like beautiful goals, right? The ones that, like, so teams very rarely get into established possession around Arsenal's box. And so I think that's hard to say. What I will say is that there's always an ebb and a flow tactically for, like, where your entrenchment should be. And it's pretty much impossible against modern Premier League players to never leave a bit of space. And so are we seeing something that's a little bit fluky? Are we seeing something where Raya is really great at, things that are close to him, but a little less great at things that are far away? Maybe the positioning is imperfect on the goalkeeper side, or maybe, like, it's a bit of luck and a bit of talent and all the above. It's tricky to say. I think Arsenal will probably have looked at these and say, hey, we need to adjust our positioning of these players a little more. Like, there was a goal from Brighton where, like, Kadioglu had just fucking acres of time and space to tee this up at the weekend against Brentford. And the Brentford guys were too deep inside the box. They didn't move. And when you give anybody that's a Premier League player time and space around the box, like, they can pretty much pick out that exact thing because they've done it so many different times. For Arsenal, they don't usually give any time and space, but it's impossible to have full coverage of those areas with explosive players. So I think that they might look for little adjustments, and that might be something they haven't quite done. It's best I got. I have
Oh, go on.
I wanted to transition to two teams that I thought were pretty interesting recently that I picked up on it because of the gambling coverage, and it's not an equivalence that most people will make right now, partly because it's two different countries. But they changed coaches recently. They definitely have talent, but they went from coaches that were quite established in the systemic needs that they wanted, and now they've gone to much more vibes-based. And we talked about one of these recently, but the other one I think is definitely in the mix now. So Real Madrid this weekend lost at Osasuna 2-1 and could not stop Osasuna from, like, creating.
Yeah.
Chelsea, their trending since getting rid of Maresca has just been a mess. And their games have been a mess. And this time they're at home to Burnley. It's basically 2-goal favorites at home to Burnley. They get their 6th red card of the season in the Premier League. 6th against Burnley even. And they end up walking out 1-1. And it's like people are like, oh, well, they're not even close because Real Madrid and Chelsea. But like the reality is you've gone from really established tactical head coaches to
Yeah,
ones
yeah.
that are less so. You've got a lot of players that, kind of push their weight around a bit. And now you're seeing the unwinding of the tactics, and you're seeing a lot more variance in performance, and Madrid in particular cannot seem to defend well consistently, and I think that's a big concern going into the Champions League.
Yeah, Real Madrid. I don't really like this front two of Vini and Mbappe. Like it's obviously good in attack, but they can't press properly from the front, and it requires them to to basically fill the midfield up with like hard working runners. And so this whole team is like, okay, the three guys who are going to do something are going to be Vinny, Mbappe, and Arda Güler, and everybody else is like a workhorse who needs to cover 1.5 men's ground in order to make this work. And you can't maintain that over the course of a season. And Osasuna away, like let's be honest, is also a tougher game than people think.
Mm-hmm.
But pretty much level on shots. Osasuna had the edge on XG. It just felt like Real Madrid. Yeah, Real Madrid did have no control of the game. The X factor here, I suppose, could be the events at Benfica the previous week, right? Where there is this cloud hanging over the club, and you can't. It's very hard to know what that feels like to the guys inside the dressing room, especially given the way that Vinny has been treated in Spain historically too. But you get Arbeloa in, and like this is kind of what I'd imagine this team would look like if you just get a guy to take over who used to play for the club. Like they look like, yeah, I'm going to put these guys out there. Oh, I've got too many attackers. Okay, I'll put in another kind of defensive midfielder-y type. Does that work? No, not really.
No, it doesn't. And that's kind of the interesting thing about football. Like you can't just stack it up with like guys who have the exact profile any particular place. And this is true even at a Real Madrid, where you would say in general, like they have as many resources as anybody on the planet. You still have to make it work, and you have to make the personalities work. But tactically, you've got to string together an attack and a defense from both sides of it against very competitive teams all the time, and guys that get a little bit tired or are a little bit focused on next week, which is another very big match. They only like ran out of Benfica 1-0 winners, right? With all the things that happened there. So, and then the Chelsea side of it is just like the whole of the Stamford Bridge pitch is sown with rakes, and the fact that they've stepped on them so many times this season isn't really that big of a surprise. Like they haven't found a center back pairing that they love that is consistent over the course of the past 2 seasons. They've gone through so many of them, partly out of injury, partly just out of like these guys aren't quite good enough, partly because the tactical needs in that defense were very high before. And now they're like maybe less high, but then everybody else has to do stuff. Kim was a little tough on Cole Palmer, I think a week ago in the newsletter. And somebody wrote in, it's like, well, Palmer's still like wrapped his thigh every single game because he's still not quite over that thing. He's like, well, then they should rest him because he's their most important player going forward, right? And I know that they need to get points, but also they need that dude healthy. If he's like long-term problematic, like how much value have you lost by not having top-tier Cole Palmer? So they're complicated, but I think that it's a very similar thing. We have super talented squad. It's interestingly deep. Not everybody does the same things. There's talent in different spots, and there's a lack of talent in different spots. And this is really where so many places like, oh, well, the head coach doesn't really do that much. I'm telling you, man, the head coach does a hell of a lot more than everybody seems to want to give them credit these days. I'm actually on the other side of the head coaches matter debate, which I never expected to be, because before I was like, yeah, most of these dudes are just like average and it's largely squad value. The really bad ones you have to fire. The really good ones, they go somewhere else. But at these top tier teams, like you got to have a fucking good coach, and he's going to face all the other good coaches against all the other good players. And you've got to be able to take 20 guys out there and assemble them into the best thing that you can every single week. And when you're not as good as that, when your analytics process isn't good at that, when your communication process isn't as good as those top tier coaches, you get runs like this, and it just shows.
Yeah. And right now, they're trying to figure out this balance in the midfield, right? Like Rosenior seems to like to bring Andre Santos in, which in theory should be a control move, but it hasn't proved that way. They've been giving up a ton to the teams they've played against. Now,
he was really good in League One, but there's a big gap.
I like him a lot, but it's they're trying to find a role for Enzo Fernandez that's obviously not in a double pivot. And Enzo Fernandez has been pretty good in attack, but then you also need to shift Palmer out to one side or the other.
Mhm.
It becomes this kind of complicated balancing act right now. And, Rosenior was talking this weekend about how he wants to create waves and waves of attacks. And actually they did do that in this game. But
Because
in
it's
lots of
Burnley.
yeah, and in lots of other games like Leeds, you're like waves and waves of attacks might actually look like a pretty end-to-end game. Like that might look like a game where you do not have very much control. And a bunch of these teams are built to fly in broken play, right?
Yeah.
Leeds
Yeah,
especially,
they're teams
I
that
think,
love to mix it up. Leeds are great at mixing it up. Bournemouth are great at mixing it up. Like they love to chop and change and then get some of their talent players out there to be able to run. Like Ryan already looks like a guy that you're like, wow, this is like Esteval Mark II, except for more central in his direct play. So yeah, I guess the strategy of paying a bunch of money for Brazilian teams seems to be very valid at the moment because there's a crop coming through and they're just all good right off the bat. But you're right. I think that each of these coaches are really struggling with this, even at the very top tier. And so when we talk about guys like Pep and like the league is causing him problems constantly, and Arteta, the league is causing him problems, and Emery, the league is causing him problems. Like Slot, who just won the title, spent hundreds of millions of pounds on players. The league is causing him problems, and it's not a solvable thing, which for the media and the pundit market, I guess, is awesome because they get to like pick it a new thing every single week if they want to. But for people inside of football, they're like, fuck, this is hard.
Yeah. I mean, and I think, you look at with Chelsea as well, you can have a game like this and you can get killed on the set pieces, and they've been getting killed on the set pieces all season. I mean, like they've got like a -4 XG difference on set pieces this season. They just keep giving them up. And I mean, it's made harder when you've played over a fifth of your games without a man for half of the time. It's ridiculous. But it was interesting to go into this match thinking about Kim's newsletter, because there's the moment in this where Palmer gets the ball and is running through on goal, right, with Kyle Walker behind him, who used to be fast but is 1,000 years old. And it was interesting to me that Palmer took the shot really early. Like he didn't back himself to go on further against Kyle Walker, and I thought, ooh, that does concern me a little bit, because that's also the sort of thing we were talking about a year ago with someone like Bukayo Saka, where we said this guy doesn't have his top gear right now.
Right. Yeah, no, I think that's true. And these guys maintaining their bodies and trying to play through it is hard. There's a story from Giggs, like way back in the day, where he tore a hamstring, I think in like his third season. And he's like, yeah, I could never run at full speed ever again. Like I could only do like an 85 or a 90% burst because I was always worried about tearing it again. And guys that are explosive, whose bodies allow them to max that out, like they have to maintain all the time. Palmer might have been that type of guy, right? Where like he was slippery. He's got great passing, especially early in a move to be able to pick somebody out. But yeah, if he's worried about his adductor or his hamstring consistently, because what you do is you end up tearing it, and then you end up with the Havertz season, and then you're playing sort of off balance or in different ways. You can't do all the things that you used to do. You can't stretch in the way they used to. So yeah, it's something to be aware of from a player perspective, because the players are so valuable, and the very, very best of them are that separate tier that are almost impossible to find. And then it's also something for, maybe Rosenior's just trying to find his feet, right? And but like, does Rosenior finding his feet, being that they miss out on 4th, 5th to to Liverpool and United, who are right there? Like it's fascinating.
Yeah, it's pretty dicey now. I mean, United could go 3 points ahead of them tonight, which would be pretty disastrous for Chelsea. Yeah, I don't know, man. Like because Chelsea obviously go to Arsenal, and they've got Manchester City coming up in a couple of months, I think, as well. They've got a rough end to the season, so I fear for them a little bit unless they find their feet fairly soon. But with the Champions League as well, whereas United going a game a week, that kind of feels like it's United's spot to lose at this stage.
Absolutely.
I can't believe I'm saying that.
United could finish third, and we got
Mm.
some feedback from a Manchester United fan, and I'm sure there'll be some in the comments here about like, why didn't you, like, flag United's summer as better than it was? And I think what we said was, like, we felt that they overpaid for players. We felt that, like, guys who overperform their expected goals, which is a thing that is very, very rarely a consistent indicator from year to year,
Mm.
they overpaid for those in particular. And we were very focused on their midfield needing to rebuild it. And what's happened basically is like they got knocked out of all their competitions. so if you want to look and say, okay, well, none of the cups mattered if we just focus on the Premier League, like, other clubs that are not Manchester United, then we're able to do just fine. And it's been actually a thing that happens like every 5 years, where a big team will have a swoon. They'll then get so far down the table that they get knocked out of Europe. Not as far as United, not necessarily, but Chelsea had to happen. And then they get to go and they get to not play all the European competitions while all the bigger clubs are. And they have a really good season because they keep their best 11. It's very consistent, and they're mostly uninjured, and they get rests all the time. They're able to tactically set up for every single game, as opposed to it being, oh, you've got 2 days till the next one. You've got 2 days because like you get a rest day in between those because it's just a recovery day. So like United are on that one right now. Now, I think we actually said reasonable things about Manchester United's recruitment over the last 2 summers, which is that, they look much smarter than they used to. But I thought Šeško for 90 million was a stupid buy. I thought that like that was overpriced by a lot, and they saved Red Bull from a bit of egg on their face in doing it. I don't think he's been super impressive so far this year, but right now United look pretty good, not least because lots of teams look pretty bad. Like they're not the same quality that we would have expected before, or they have their own problems that they're dealing with, and a lot of injury problems, which is stacked up because of all these competitions that all of these teams are going deep into, especially in Europe.
And would we be getting this kind of question if United had drawn with Arsenal and lost to West Ham, both of which could easily have happened, right? This is a team that still sacked its manager in the middle of the season.
They did,
and are like recalibrating on the fly. Like, plus, I think that one question that I remember getting asked a lot when we had our meetup for drinks last summer with people who listened to the show, people said, like, how do you and Ted think about these things differently? And I was like, well, for one, like, I talk about it on YouTube, and Ted has to convince people to spend a lot of money on these players. So, like, I do it much more carelessly, I would argue. But also, I think a lot of fans say, well, these guys look good now, and so therefore aren't these transfers good? And they ignore the fact that people like you and Ravi and Kim do not look at it as a 12-month investment in a player.
correct.
They look at it for the long-term investment and what it means for the maneuverability as that contract winds down.
So yes, there's like opportunity cost, which is a big one, which is basically like, we spent this money now. What does that impede us from doing in the future? And it used to be teams like Everton, their fans were like, oh yeah, we can spend as much money as we want. Like, it doesn't matter that we bought Bolasie for like 28 billion pounds. And you're like, you've bought a lot of Bolasis. And then like none of them seem to like fit the bill. And eventually you end up, what we call kind of budget locked, unless you have some sort of state program behind you. But Manchester United were the richest team in the world, like by a pretty decent distance. Like maybe Real Madrid were second, but certainly in the Premier League. And they have had this huge swoon. And so when we're looking at rebuilding that type of team, you're like, all right, you need to maintain like a lot of optionality, which means that you need to be careful about the prices that you pay. You don't know which players are going to work out and which ones don't. Everybody has overconfidence about this. I have been in this industry for 12 years. I've worked with some of the most brilliant people in the world in this space, some of whom, like Liverpool, have hired, who are both like not just the most brilliant people in football, but like literally people who have worked in astrophysics. And they will tell you that, the transfer market is humbling because they're humans and they're complicated and there's just so much complexity. You don't know exactly how it's going to work. So how do you minimize your mistake threshold? Is you make sure that you don't pay too much, because if you pay a lot, that has to work out. It has to work out for you because there's only so much budget, even on the magic money tree. And if things don't work out, then you're like, well, who's the bigger sucker that we can sell this guy onto? Maybe it's Saudi. Maybe his agent like does you a favor. Maybe you like take a 50% haircut on a transfer fee. And you're like, look, we were able to get out of that deal so we could bring in somebody else. So we weren't constantly trying to do that. But if you make enough of these mistakes, you end up really submarining your performance for quite a long time. And that has been the case with that team. So when they're rebuilding, you're like, look, just don't overpay. Get quality, don't overpay. Let the overpriced players that you have had get their way off the books, which hasn't always worked because they're always looking for the next thing to be able to, oh, if we just get these two exactly right, then that'll be perfect for us and we'll get better. And that has been the case for like a decade. And maybe they're finally coming out the other side of that. Or maybe if they get in Europe, you'll be like, oh, the squad depth's really poor. And they spent all this money on these players that are only like, maybe a 65th percentile player and not a 90th percentile player. And so now, like, once they're in Europe, like, they just don't have the competitive element that the rest of the Premier League was doing last year. So, I mean, it's not to say that I don't think they have been better than they have been in the last two summers, which we have said.
Yeah.
But I definitely felt there was plenty of valid criticism around the players that they chose and the prices that they paid. But it's working out for them right now. So, hey, that's great.
Yeah, that's how it works. So L for us, I guess. But it's always made me laugh that that United fans will say, well, there's one price for other teams and there's another price for us. And but also that they seem to think that this phenomenon, if it exists, is what makes their transfer dealings hard, as opposed to it being something produced by the fact that they routinely say, how much do you want for that guy? Okay, yeah, we'll just pay that. Oh, you want 10 million? Okay, we'll pay that too. Like, they never seem to put the two and two together to understand that it's because they never walk away. And the reason Liverpool don't get gouged to the same degree is because Liverpool say, yeah, okay, like we're not going to do that. That seems silly.
This summer, Liverpool got gouged pretty well as well.
Sure.
So that
but at least for the best guys, for like the guys who are like, this is the best available striker in the world. This is the best young attacking midfield prospect in the world. Like, fair enough.
And those deals were not as punchy as the headlines. Like, there were clauses inside of it. There were things that were lesser. Like, they did make a little more sense. Not to defend like that performance side of it either. Like, we were like, ooh, they paid a lot, but they paid a lot for pretty good players. And Arsenal fans were so livid that they did not get Ishak. And I would tell you, if they had Ishak right now, Arsenal fans would be so livid that Ishak is injured and has barely played this season. And you're like, maybe just it's an anger management problem and you should go to therapy.
Yeah, if any Arsenal fans are looking for a therapist, actually, I don't have any availability, and I think that seeing an Arsenal fan for therapy might actually kill me. It's bad enough talking to people with kids, but okay. Well, shall we? Do you want to talk about your boy Nico O'Reilly, because he had a big weekend, and he's been an interesting one because Man City, Pep just doing like unpep stuff, right? He was like, we're going to play a bunch of giants. We're not going to do, we're not going to do any of this like bullshit, like passing around nonsense. We're going to get a bunch of big guys who are going to run at you really fast. And then you get stuff like Haaland playing, pinpoint right-footed cross for Nico O'Reilly to nod him.
First of all, it's kind of fun to watch. I'm not sure that it's as successful as as the old style used to be, but at some point he's like, I got to change things, and this is what I got right now. City are big.
Yeah.
City, like, one of my favorite parts about football is over the years, like, I'm 6'2" and I'm pretty big frame. And so like I would walk into a football team locker room or meet the players and I was like, wow, you guys are all tiny. This is fun. And then every once in a while you meet a Jonathan Tah. You're like, fuck, dude, you're real big. But that was like a once in a while type thing. It doesn't happen in the Premier League anymore. For the most part, Premier League is like, wow, everybody's, first of all, they look like old school, like Chelsea, where they've been, lifting forever or whatever sort of creatine enhancements they've taken. But yeah, like everybody is big and strong. And it's weird to see Pep, who used to have a team of technical small players, but strong enough. And then there were some big players in the back. But that was probably a reason why he was always terrified about set pieces. Now, like, they got beast mode all over the place. And Haaland continues to demonstrate that he is a very versatile talent when challenged.
Man, I hate seeing him do stuff like this. Like, but it's interesting, isn't it? Because of course, like earlier in the season, we were saying, wow, all the chances in this team are funneled towards Haaland. And then lately, Haaland has obviously not been scoring open play goals, though he's still been getting chances, of course, because he's Haaland. And it feels like, the narrative is that they've ticked up. I mean, what do you have the numbers on that? Like, what do you think about Man City's trending? Say since Christmas, is there anything that bears out this idea that they are, they're gearing up for the classic Pep run in?
This is a good question. I haven't like paid too much attention. I know that, defense is okay. They still
Hmm.
give up quality shots that are too high. And against compared to Arsenal, you're like, okay, like there is, I think like a 0.30 per game expected goal difference total in how it
Okay.
looks. They've mostly been static for the season. I would say their trending in defense means they're a little looser, and their trending in attack is basically flat. But that variation can just be like who they've played in recent times. Like, is
Hmm.
there a
Hmm.
challenging run or not? Um, I think they've done a decent job kind of continuing to load up with challenging players. It is weird to see Semenyo play central, which has happened a couple
Hmm.
times since he brought in, and like he does not feel technical enough to be a central player in Pep's system. So again, like, is he just going for directness? Does he want to have three
Yeah.
players sort of up in that front line that cause problems for defenses in terms of mismatch and physicality? Like that might be a thing. I don't know. Like it feels like Pep's playing an NBA style uh, football match, and it might
Mm.
be that he's been hanging out with Steve Kerr and, and coaches like that to learn more. But I really like Nico O'Reilly, and I've been on the for the last 2 years. I've been like, wow, I watched that kid. He looks really good, and I can't when he's on the pitch. I keep watching him. I don't think that he's the goal scoring threat that City really wants in
Yeah.
that position. But when he pulls those out too, you're like, he's got more talents than I expected.
Yeah, and at least it's somebody with legs, like next to Rodri. And Rodri then, had some really good passing output in this game, like creative passing output, I mean, from a deep position. Yeah, it's interesting though that we started at the beginning of the season saying, I don't know if Cherki and Reinders are going to be guys that Pep wants in these big games. And again, it feels like as the season's gone on, despite the fact that Cherki looks electric when he plays,
Yeah.
I think Pep just recognizes, I don't know if I can exert the kind of control that I want to in order to get this guy maximized.
Yeah, and I think they don't have the squad to make him that way, but he can cause chaos late in a game. And that's what
Mm.
he does, right? When things get bigger and wider and the spaces open up, Cherky in those spaces, he's really good in small spaces, but like as things get stretched and legs get tired, you bring him
Yeah.
on late. He's just everywhere and he's very obnoxious. Bernardo Silva was a guy who for years and years and years was like he had the engine to be able to be all over the place, but still a good enough technical player to fit in with Pep's system. Now, like he's a guy you can run out once a week to do most of that job for
Mhm.
65 minutes, but like you really can't rely on him for twice a week, full 90s. And I'm not sure that Pep has any players like that anymore that do all the things that he needs to do as reliably as they used to. I'm really curious where they go in the Champions League this year because I think that they're going to be just a little whisker short in the Premier League. They are very counterpunchery in the Champions League. They clearly have like really elite threats that can cause
Mhm.
problems, but how you set that up in a two-legged match that's knockouts coming up, like that might be the most interesting set of fixtures that you see through the rest of the Champions League setup.
Yeah, I'd be quite excited about them there too, not least because it feels like a bunch of the superior teams in the competition, have taken a little downturn lately. I mean,
Yeah.
Barcelona have always had the same issues, but Real Madrid certainly. Bayern have been kind of off the boil recently. Obviously, if PSG explodes, which is very, very possible, then maybe that's another team up there with Arsenal who could maybe control Man City. But that kind of feels like it. After that, there's no team there that you trust to get a handle on Haaland plus some guy running off him. So I'd be quite interested to see where they end up. And maybe once we get the draw at the end of this week, it'll be interesting to start thinking how these managers are calibrating things as they go into this tough stretch of the season.
We have the second leg of the knockouts coming up.
Mm.
Historically, these Champions League leg knockouts used to be very low scoring. Like they'd be
Yeah.
gritty. They would be like, tight affairs. And, 2.5, 2 3/4 goals was a pretty normal thing. Now, like I don't even blink at a total that's like 3.25. And I think in the first rounds, like it was like 4.25 average goals scored per game. Like and
Crazy.
part of that is Karabag and Newcastle just like taking them out back to the woodshed. Stop, they're already dead. But part of it is like no one has control. Everyone seems to be able to attack at a pretty high pace. And I you mentioned PSG. I was like, if PSG and City played right now, like what's the total on that game? Is it like 4? It feels like the only way to win is to just keep attacking because you can't get a big enough lead and everybody's too fast. And that's not actually how football works, but it just feels like that way at times, especially if you're just in highlight mode.
Yeah, there were so many managers who are trying to exert control, and yet we somehow ended up in a post-control world where basically nobody can do it apart from Arsenal and then Bayern and PSG sometimes.
Right. And even Arsenal sometimes, right? Arsenal lose a 2-goal lead late to the worst team in the league. You're like,
well, not in the Champions League. In the Champions League, Arsenal are like total control. In the Premier League, you can put them up against a side that will definitely get relegated, and and they'll just like lose it with half an hour to go. Who else do you want to talk about before we get out of here? Do you want to talk about poor West Ham? Poor West Ham.
I'm kind of scared of West Ham right now. Like nobody wants to face them. I looked at that game, and there were 2 games that really shocked me in the stats this week.
The stats in this game.
Yeah, so there are 2 games that really shocked me in the stats this week. The first one was Liverpool's game at Forest. And I was like, oh, yeah, sure. Like that must have been like, a beating and then Liverpool come on late as they did last year. Right. So Liverpool just like keep ratcheting up the pressure again and again and again, like in the Brentford match that I was at in person last year, where it was 0-0. And then I got double Darwin Nunez. Double Darwin is like never a good thing if you're on the other side of that. And so that was like an 88th and a 93rd minute double from Darwin that put them over the top. But like Liverpool felt like they had that match the whole time. This was the opposite. They finally managed to get something late, and it was like this fluky pinball goal that comes back in off of McAllister. But Forest had 19 shots on a 0-0 game against Liverpool at home. Liverpool had 10. You're like, I don't know what to think about that. So that's one thing. And maybe that's a positive for Forest because they were doing stuff. But the other side of it is certainly this West Ham team, which, hasn't lost in like 5 and look like they're able to take people on. And what did they put up? Like 2.4 expected goals or something crazy?
Something like that. And 20 shots to 10
against Bournemouth, who are, a bit up and down, but like a really sturdy team and should be more than enough to challenge West Ham. It was a 0-0 game, but that was certainly not the story.
Yeah. Every time I think Bournemouth are just done for the season, which kind of starts normally in December and then rumbles on for a couple of months, they then just go and clothesline somebody. Like there have been so many games where in the first half they'll get shellacked, and then in the second half they come out and really run up the shots and the XG. And man, West Ham should have won this game comfortably. West Ham have been a bit unlucky generally since the new year. They obviously lost to Forest, they drew with United, obviously drew with Bournemouth, and in all those games you think they've been the better side. And then you look at their fixture list now and you say, okay, the next 4 fixtures they've got Fulham away, plus Liverpool, City, and Aston Villa away. So it's just like there's no reward. The hits keep coming. But you pointed out in the newsletter that if you were Forest or if you were Spurs, you would look at these West Ham performances and say, we might be in a bit of trouble here.
Yeah. If you look at the overall of this recent period and you think that they might be different from what they had in the past, you're like, yeah, okay. Like West Ham are live to come back up. And that means one of those 2 are going to get sucked into the vortex. And nobody wants to be sucked into that vortex at all. We very rarely say positive things for Hammers fans, but it felt like something we should note because even though it was a 0-0 and like they've had a good run, and if they can continue that, there are very strong rays of hope.
Man, Spurs getting relegated it is then, I guess.
I think the joke on Twitter was like, I definitely think Spurs can finish top 6 next year.
You know what would the actual funniest outcome, I think, would be
people were talking about the championship though, not
sure.
in the Premier League.
I understood.
I did, but I had to explain the joke for everybody else.
I think that wouldn't it be funny to watch Arsenal fans try and calibrate their emotions if Arsenal miss out on the title to City, but Spurs get relegated? It would. If you really hate Arsenal fans, so long as you're not a Spurs fan, I think maybe you should be rooting for that because I don't know what would happen in the community, but it'd be very enjoyable to watch.
I think Spurs fans had a lesser version of that last season, which is that, Arsenal did not get any sort of useful titles there, and Spurs managed to win the Europa League and get into the Champions League despite what it was a terrible season. I have to wrap up today because I got another call I got to go to. Thank you everybody for listening. I know you're just here for Patrick, but that's okay. Like, I'm here for Patrick too. If you're interested, we are going to start announcing our featured speakers for the TTF conference. Tickets are on sale. We've got some very interesting speakers that are coming out, and the first one hopefully will be later this week. That is May 22nd in central London. We'd love to see you there. We have the Patreon, as we mentioned. We also have more variance betting analysis that will be out Tuesday for the second legs of the Champions League knockouts. And that's all I got for today. So tell Patrick in the comments how much you love him. Otherwise, we'll talk to you again soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.